All right, so progressive media, what I would call the sincere progressive media, not the neoliberal TYT, MSNBC, we rule the world media and will do what our masters tell us to do media. Not that media, but the other end of the progressive spectrum is beginning to implode. And the reason it's imploding is because you're seeing an honest assessment of those who are defecting, who are kind of taking their talking points from the people who are making money, whether it's the aforementioned TYT or a guy like Kyle Kalinske or other people that do this. And again, I don't spend a lot of time watching the videos. I do know that Jimmy Dore seems to be a thorn in everybody's side. It's kind of like what Glenn Greenwald does. It's what Matt Taibbi does. It's what Max Blumenthal does to a certain extent. It's because they call everyone out, including the poachers within their own movement, they become despised. They become an anathema to the cause, which is obviously, defeat Trump or conservatives bad or, Tucker Carlson, quick, get him banned. Or I'm glad the NSA is spying on Tucker Carlson. He should be spied on. And you think to yourself, what? What? This is progressive, right? So I'm beginning to think much of it is regressive. There are a few good channels out there. Not that I agree with them on a lot of points. Convo Couch, Pasta, I consider him a friend. He was on with me on this show, and we had a very good talk. And I think we agree on some big time stuff. And it's too bad that Americans can't get over their cultural Marxism and just listen to one another when it comes to real ideas that could move the country forward. I flirted with the Green Party. It was a short flirtation. I was running out of ideas at the time because I'm thinking, okay, what party is on the ballot? And of course, everybody knows my struggle session recently with the Libertarians, and it's getting worse because I'm finding more and more information that is disturbing about the Libertarian Party, and I will present that. Maybe I'll have my friend Stacy back on because she knows some new things and she's shared some information with me. And this gets back to, how the whole government was really designed, the current form of government was designed for people who are decent, upright, moral. And look, I'm not going to bring God into it. Sorry, I did this in a video and I think I was very honest about it and I tried not to be offensive about it, but I know it's a delicate topic. But moral means doing the right thing, not being a liar, not being deceptive. These are all things that are so prevalent really across the board, Republican, Democrat, independent, progressive, libertarian. And you find out that the libertarians and some progressives are basically just, they're out to be radicals. They're out to be disruptors, not in a good way. I mean, you want to disrupt the establishment, but you don't want to disrupt it with more disruption because it's almost like a false flag takes away from the big issues. Now, the progressive left, though, is imploding because they're running out of hope, right? I watched this video by Frank Analysis, who I haven't really paid that much attention to. His channel has grown a lot. I think he's in a good lane and he provides good information, good content. He does a professional presentation, whereas I just turn the camera on and start blabbing. And for some, that is a weak presentation when there's so much really cool special effects and editing that can be done. But I appreciate Frank because I think at the beginning, or Franco, because he presented a problem and then asked people, what should we do about this problem? Now, I didn't like, when I was on that channel, I didn't like most of the answers, whether it was defund the police. And I'm like, okay, so how do you fix, I mean, if you don't have police, what do you do? You know, it's just, and people just sat there because it was a talking point that's thrown out over and over again. People go, oh yeah, let's just defund the police. That will fix it. And that way you won't have any more bad police. Well, you need police. I'm at the point where I want to go all authoritarian on these cities and lock them down and say, nope, get your act together. If you can't get your act together, you don't, sorry, curfews, the whole thing. The whole thing. If we could do, hey, if we can do it for a virus, right? We could do it for, 140 people dead in one weekend. We could definitely do it for that. Being shot at. Never mind the guns. People will talk about the guns. You have to have somebody on the trigger in order for the gun to cause the problem. All right. Yeah, you take away the weapons. Okay, who's to say they don't get hand grenades? I mean, just think logically about the economy and the way it works. And we have all these underground economies and we cause problems around the world. I'm the first to admit that we destabilize areas of the world, which causes problems at our southern border. But again, why can't we be Switzerland, right? Armed, neutral, like a fortress. That's Switzerland, right? People don't want to mess with Switzerland because they know and Switzerland doesn't want to cause any problems. They want to make their own stuff and mind their own business. And that's the way America used to kind of sort of be from time to time. Was never perfect in that regard. But I think the progressives, what they want is stuff that technically we could do. Let me say this. We could give people healthcare. We could give people free government-run healthcare, or I would do free private-run healthcare regulated by your local community, a local body of overseers. Sounds like a lot of bureaucrats, and that worries me, but you have to have control over it. And then you do have to have a way to pay for it. You do have to have a way. Now you could say, well, they print, and my logic last year was, hey, they're printing money. Give me some of that money, or give the people who truly need it some of that money. We should, first of all, the premise is false because we shouldn't be printing money. But if we were, right, and we gave it to the people who could drive the economy, or at least give them something that would help, make their life better, increase their standard of living. Watching these Ross Perot videos from 1992, and he says, we haven't had a increase in the standard of living since like 1971, Larry. He's just, I mean, he, and this was 30 years ago, and it hasn't changed. It's still the same problem. But Perot's solution was to cut spending, right? And lower taxes for the people toward the bottom and the middle. Cut the spending, lower the taxes, and in some cases on larger corporations, raise the taxes because you need a revenue stream. And what do we get now? We get the neoliberal corporations, Amazon, whoever else out there. I think of them first, and they don't pay taxes. And that's ridiculous. Occupy Wall Street was correct. Hedge fund guys, Bernie Sanders had this idea where he would tax all these little Wall Street transactions. They really wouldn't miss it. Hate to sound like, a dyed-in-the-wool progressive, but they really wouldn't miss it. And that money could save someone's life who can't afford, let's say they need a transplant. Say they need some life-saving treatment that they can't afford because their insurance won't cover it. You could have a slush fund. You could have an emergency healthcare slush fund for legitimate use, for emergency authorization use. Imagine that instead of what we have now going on for EAU, which is a farce, okay? And is probably, what we were doing now is probably going to wreak havoc with the healthcare system for decades. It's already dysfunctional as it is, and what we're doing is going to make it even more dysfunctional. But watching a guy like Franco and watching Jimmy Dore and what's happening with Kyle Kalinske and TYT and these independent journalists on the left, if there's no unity over there and they can kind of agree on a couple of points, but then they're fighting constantly, as I was telling my friend Charles, it becomes another form of tribalism where, you know, you needed to have a unified voice. You needed unique voices that could present it differently to appeal to different audiences. Obviously, Jimmy Dore is a comedian, so he has this great sense of humor. But if he's all down and out and miserable because of everything that's going on, he's not as effective at getting his message out there. And again, I don't agree with a lot of what he says, but I agree with the spirit of his channel. And I agree with the spirit of, say, the Convo Couch, even though I don't agree with a lot of what they say. And let me get back to Tulsi Gabbard, too, who, as you know, used to be what this channel was about. Tulsi Gabbard is a figure that could bring people together, but toward the end of her campaign and sort of transitioning out of government, she left when I think she should have stayed, or she should have announced immediately that she was forming some kind of an exploratory committee. The country is at odds with each other. I want to bring people together. I want to turn down the temperature. This would appeal to the people that like some of what Trump does, but they don't like his rhetoric. The progressives would trust Tulsi Gabbard more, even though she's definitely culturally conservative. Let's just be honest. Tulsi is a cultural conservative. And, you know, this is why she goes on with somebody like Mike Huckabee or Trey Gowdy, because she can communicate with those people. Whereas if she goes on TYT, she's very suspicious that she's going to get ambushed about Syria or some stupid thing. And she's going to be called out on something her father said 20 years ago. And I think a lot of us are really tired of that. I think the progressives were okay with having Tulsi as their standard bearer. Obviously, they had Bernie, and then Bernie just absolutely folded up like an old chair and went along. And maybe he's calling the shots, but I don't think he's calling the shots. Bernie was never truly anti-war enough for my liking. He had anti-war tendencies, but based on Biden, and I know Biden is supposedly bringing troops out of Afghanistan, but he's full steam ahead everywhere else, including Syria and Iraq and probably Venezuela. I mean, they're just getting started over there, you know. They just bombed Syria the other day, right? They just went in there, and I'm just like, okay, all right, this is the war machine. And the progressives, the real ones, want to stop the war machine, as do libertarians, some of them who aren't busy worrying about what the age of consent is. They are thinking about, you know, anti-war. And there are a lot of America Firsters who have come to the conclusion that, hey, bombing other countries or sanctioning other countries or giving billions away to other countries, that's really not America first, you know? And I think there's a coalition there. And I thought this last year, there's a coalition there. Progressives, I think, need to reach out to the Trumpers and to some other folks who are kind of misfits within all of that and say, look, you know, I don't agree with you on this cultural issue, but you and I should stand together against the surveillance state. You and I should stand together when Tucker Carlson is worried that the NSA is spying on him. And I don't think he would go on the #1 rated show on cable and spill the beans if there wasn't truth in what he was talking about. That should scare the crap out of everybody across the political spectrum, except for the neoliberals who are rubbing their hands together, because there goes another political opponent. All right. The world would stink without a commentator like Tucker Carlson, whether you agree or disagree. His voice is sharp, and it juxtaposes a lot of the administrative state and the deep entrenched nature of what our government is. I mean, Glenn Greenwald has been on that show multiple times. Jimmy Dore has been on there and treated really well. And what's ironic is, in the old days during W. Bush, these guys used to get on MSNBC, but that whole organization has shifted. And this is the problem for progressives who are banging their heads up against the wall and saying, well, this isn't really any different from the Dick Cheney stuff, except, the rainbow flags and the cultural Marxism that has become pretty much the norm over there. And like the clarion call, the loudest thing they talk about all day long, or the lawsuits against, people that have worked for the Trump organization their whole life and were giving money away to people to keep their lights on and so forth. And then they get indicted because they broke the law. It's kind of like giving food to homeless people in certain jurisdictions. The city says you can't do it. And then the people get arrested for doing it. And they're like, this guy needed something to eat and I gave him something to eat. And you're telling me I can't do that. You're not taking care of him. See, we honestly could solve all of these problems, but our government is just out of control. And yeah, there's a rumor out there, this thing that happened down in Haiti where the president got assassinated. There's a rumor that this is a job that was basically carried out by the US government. Why? No idea. It's not like we're going to try to remake the island in our own image. By the way, we could cure all of the problems on that island with the money that we waste via government waste. We could cure that island. Those people could have houses, they could have running water, toilets that flush. It could be an island paradise. And yeah, we could not install somebody down there, but we could certainly encourage a functioning democracy down in Haiti, and we could help facilitate it. But we don't. We pick and choose what we're going to do. Third world will stay the third world. I think it's because Haiti doesn't have anything that the country really needs, right? I mean, that's always the punchline is, oh, do they have any natural resources? Well, it's a decent island, but when a hurricane hits it, you've got, mudslides. I don't know. It's not really good geography. We can't really do anything with it. There's no natural resources. I mean, there's got to be some oil somewhere, right? Maybe baby drill. I don't know. I'm not saying to do that. I'm just saying usually the government can come up with something as to why we're going to go in and do something to destabilize a region. But in the case of Haiti, my guess is maybe there was an uprising that was going to take place where these people were going to form a more functioning government. I'm sure stuff will come out, but that's not what this video is about. I just went off on a tangent like I normally do. It's sad to see these progressive channels that have worked really hard to build an audience. And I think they're sincere in their desire that the country be a better place to live and that people have health care and clean water. When I see Naomi Wolf lining up with Steve Bannon on certain issues nowadays, I think to myself, there are coalitions that we could build instead of yelling at each other and accusing each other. We should be able to sit down with people who voted for Trump and people who voted for Bernie or Tulsi, because there's way more going on there in common than you can imagine. And for you libertarians, I'm sorry, you guys are kind of outside the loop. You just are. Because I don't know what you guys are really about. The more I look into it, the more, and I was this close to becoming a libertarian. I was telling people maybe libertarian is the way to go. I did videos and I feel almost embarrassed that I went that far. And I may even take some of those videos off the channel because I'm not encouraging people to join a cult. All right. I'm not in, it's the same. I wouldn't say to join QAnon. The libertarians are an intellectual QAnon. All right. They've got good ideas, but then there are some things within that movement that scare the crap out of me. And it's, like you say, it's kind of this controlled opposition against a populist uprising, which I think would be far more effective at doing some of the things the libertarians want to do, but not all of them. And I don't want all of those things done anyway. So I'll be exploring that in the days to come. But in the meantime, keep watching the channel. Also subscribe. And, if you're one of those progressive types, I'm not your adversary, but I will say this is, if any of your goals lead to authoritarianism, I really don't want to have any part of it. I'll listen to you. But at the end of the day, my freedom is the most important thing I have. And if I lose that, then free healthcare really isn't going to help me.